Bruiser Brody wasn't just a wrestler. He was a one-man demolition crew who somehow turned unprofessional into a full-time gimmick. Bookers feared him, fans adored him, and wrestlers mostly wanted to strangle him. Brody walked into a locker room like a tornado, unpredictable, loud, and guaranteed to leave someone bleeding or fuming. The guy made refusing to do jobs look like an art form, except instead of paint, he used chairs, fists, and the sheer will to ruin your night. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to make enemies, and usually succeeded. Plenty of wrestlers respected Brody's toughness, but respect and hatred are only a hair apart in this business. And Brody lived on that razor's edge. You either admired his stand against promoters, or you wanted him 6 feet under. Spoiler alert, one guy actually took him up on that. Today we're not talking about Brody's fans, imitators, or the people who politely tolerated him. We're digging into the men who hated him, plotted revenge, muttered curses, and hoped the next match wouldn't leave them bruised, embarrassed, or facing another Brody beatdown. Lex Luger didn't just fear Brody, he hated him, and for very real documented reasons. In Florida, Luger stepped into a steel cage expecting a match, only to find himself humiliated. Brody ignored his offense, no-sold punches, and treated him like a human prop for the audience's amusement. Luger literally climbed out of the cage mid-match. That wasn't fear alone, it was pure frustration. Luger hated how Brody publicly disrespected him, making a rookie look incompetent in front of fans and peers. Backstage, the resentment only grew. Luger had trained, followed instructions, and worked hard, but Brody had no interest in cooperation. According to shoot interviews, Luger described Brody as a loose cannon who punished anyone who wasn't a hardened vet, leaving rising stars like him powerless to make an impression. Brody's refusal to cooperate and tendency to dominate matches created a professional environment built on humiliation rather than competition. The hatred wasn't about fear, it was about the principle. Luger respected Brody's toughness but loathed his unpredictability and total disregard for others' careers. Every match felt like a minefield, where a single misstep could humiliate you or damage your reputation. Luger resented being forced to navigate that minefield, to constantly prove himself under the shadow of someone who thrived on making others fail. Brody left no room for mistakes, no room for pride, and certainly no room for dignity. For Luger, that wasn't just intimidating, it was infuriating, and it forged a genuine, lasting hatred toward one of wrestling's most feared men. Backstage in the territory days, Brody had a reputation that made even the slickest operators nervous. Heenan didn't mince words in a later shoot, laying out exactly why Brody drove him insane. The core issue, Brody didn't care about anyone but himself. Heenan explained that Brody would no-show or deliberately botch matches to punish promoters, leaving wrestlers, sometimes earning as little as $50, high and dry. Heenan remembered one incident vividly. Brody had promised to appear for a regional card but vanished without notice. "I hated him for it," Heenan said. "Not because he didn't show up for me, but because the guys in the ring were left with nothing. $50 in their pockets, nothing for the families at home. Brody didn't give a damn." The brain went further, describing Brody as a man who treated the schedule like a suggestion, not a commitment. Promoters tried to reason with him. Brody shrugged, claiming he'd only work if it suited him. Every missed appearance or botched sequence was a message to the office, and Heenan couldn't stomach the casual cruelty. Despite the chaos, Brody's in-ring skill was undeniable, which made the hate even sharper. Heenan respected talent, but hated selfishness. "He could have been a hero for everyone," Heenan said. "Instead, he was a tornado of chaos, and we all got swept up in it." It was the perfect storm of skill, ego, and negligence, a combination that earned Brody the wrath of Heenan, a man who understood that wrestling wasn't just showbiz, it was people counting on you. Antonio Inoki prided himself on discipline, hierarchy, and keeping New Japan locked tight under his thumb. Then along came Bruiser Brody, the wild Texan swinging a chain, kicking chairs, and telling promoters exactly where to shove their booking sheet. Their relationship was oil and water. Inoki saw himself as the serious martial artist bringing credibility to wrestling, while Brody treated the business like it was his playground. Brody had zero respect for authority, and that included Inoki's. The heat built from Brody, refusing to follow Inoki's carefully laid out scripts. In Japan, hierarchy is everything. Inoki expected younger foreign talent to bow to the system, eat losses, and keep the machine rolling. Brody wasn't having it. He hated doing clean jobs, and when Inoki pushed for finishes that made him look weak, Brody flat out walked. On one infamous night in 1985, he literally left the ring mid-match against Inoki, brawled to the back, and bolted, leaving Inoki fuming in front of a live crowd. In Japanese culture, That wasn't just unprofessional, it was humiliation. For Inoki, respect was currency. Brody shredded it. Every no-sell, every argument over payoffs, every time Brody flexed his leverage with New Japan, it undercut Inoki's authority. That's why he couldn't stand him. Brody wasn't just difficult, he was uncontrollable. And Inoki hated nothing more than losing control. Humor shot? Inoki wanted to be seen as Japan's Muhammad Ali. Brody treated him more like Japan's substitute teacher, someone to ignore until the bell rang. Bruiser Brody wasn't just disliked by promoters. He had wrestlers who flat out hated him, and nobody more so than Jose Gonzalez, better known in Puerto Rico as Invader 1. This wasn't, we don't get along in the locker room heat. This was brooding personal resentment that turned deadly. Gonzalez had long-standing issues with Brody's presence in Puerto Rico. Brody had a reputation for refusing to follow finishes, strong-arming promoters, and working stiff, all things that undermined Gonzalez, who was both a top local star and, at times, a booker for Carlos Colon's WWC. Every time Brody no-sold in the ring, it chipped away at Gonzalez's standing. You can imagine the humiliation. He's the hometown hero, but the wild American makes him look like a rookie. That kind of ego bruise festers. The resentment reached its sick peak in 1988 at the Bayamon Stadium show. In the locker room, Gonzalez asked Brody to step aside to talk privately. Minutes later, Brody was bleeding out from stab wounds. That wasn't about a match gone wrong. It was Gonzalez's hatred boiling over after years of professional embarrassment. Court testimony, accounts from Dutch Mantell and Tony Atlas, all point to it. Gonzalez didn't lose his temper that night. He acted on feelings he'd been carrying for years. Gonzalez walked free, acquitted after a trial so messy it felt like Puerto Rico itself was protecting its own. Brody's murder was the final proof. Jose Gonzalez didn't just hate Bruiser Brody, he eliminated him. Wrestling's corridors aren't paved with glitter. They're lined with grudges and bad blood, from Heenan's disdain for lazy, self-serving talent to Inoki's fury at Brody undermining authority, and Gonzalez's deadly resentment, real-life heat-shaped careers, promotions, and in some cases, fates. These weren't scripted promos. This was backstage life where respect was earned, not given, and crossing the wrong person could cost more than a title shot. Every one of these men had reasons to seethe, from financial disputes to professional slights, and their hatred didn't sit quietly. It erupted in words, actions, and in Gonzalez's case, tragedy. The wrestling world thrives on spectacle, but behind the curtain, it's ruthless, calculated, and occasionally lethal. The legacy of these feuds reminds us that real-life drama in wrestling wasn't about storylines. It was about survival, respect, and control, all played out in sweat-stained locker rooms. So, next time you watch a match, remember, those sneers, stares, and missteps weren't always acting. Sometimes they were the residue of real animosity that burned hotter than any pyrotechnic. Keep your eyes open and your respect earned, or you might end up the next cautionary tale. Thanks for watching.